The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the endless desert. Sand whipped through the air like a restless spirit, stinging any exposed skin it could find. In the middle of this barren wasteland stood a cluster of military tents, their fabric flapping noisily against the relentless wind. The scene was chaotic. Soldiers rushing back and forth, voices shouting orders, and the distant rumble of artillery echoing ominously. Inside one of the larger tents, chaos reigned as well. A makeshift medical bay had been set up here, its sterile white sheets stained with dirt and blood from countless casualties. Men lay on cots, groaning in pain or staring blankly at the ceiling, their faces pale and drawn. Amidst all this carnage stood two figures who couldn't have been more different yet were inexplicably tied together by fate. One was Captain Ronan Hale, a human soldier whose rugged features bore the marks of years spent fighting under harsh conditions. His uniform was torn and filthy, his face streaked with sweat and grime. He sat propped up on a cot, clutching his side where a deep wound bled steadily despite the efforts of the medics around him. Ronan's dark eyes darted around the tent, taking in the suffering around him while trying to mask his own agony. Standing beside him was an alien nurse unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Her name was Vieira Solon, though most humans simply called her the healer. She wasn't just beautiful. She radiated an ethereal glow that seemed almost otherworldly. Her skin shimmered faintly, shifting between hues of silver and green depending on how the light hit her. Long hair cascaded down her back, each strand glowing softly like strands of moonlight woven into existence. But what truly set her apart were her eyes. Large, luminous orbs that glowed faintly gold and seemed capable of seeing straight through lies and fear. Vieira moved gracefully among the wounded, her presence calming even as she worked tirelessly to save lives. She carried herself with an air of quiet authority, her movements precise and efficient. Unlike many others, she didn't shy away from the gruesome realities of war. Instead, she embraced them, treating every patient with equal care regardless of rank or species. Yet there was something enigmatic about her, a mystery lurking beneath her serene exterior that no one dared to question. As Ronan watched her tend to another soldier nearby, he felt a strange mix of awe and unease. There was no denying her beauty, but it wasn't just physical. It was the way she commanded respect without raising her voice, the way her touch seemed to ease not only wounds but also fears. And yet, something about her unnerved him. Perhaps it was the intensity of her gaze when it landed on him earlier, or maybe it was the fact that she hadn't spoken much since arriving at the battlefield hours ago. Ronan shifted uncomfortably on the cot, wincing as fresh waves of pain shot through his body. He glanced down at his wound, cursing silently. If he didn't get proper treatment soon, he knew he wouldn't last much longer. The thought sent a chill running down his spine, not because he feared death itself, but because he wasn't ready to leave behind everything he'd fought so hard for. When Vieira finally turned toward him again, her golden eyes locking onto his, Ronan felt his breath catch in his throat. She approached slowly, her steps deliberate, as if she were savoring every moment leading up to whatever came next. When she stopped beside his cot, she didn't say a word immediately. Instead, she simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The noise of the battlefield faded into the background, leaving only the sound of Ronan's ragged breathing and the soft rustle of Vieira's flowing robes. Then, without warning, she leaned closer, her voice low and melodic. "I'll save you," she said, her words carrying a weight that made Ronan's heart skip a beat. "But only if you agree to marry me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ronan blinked, certain he'd misheard her. Marry her? Was this some kind of joke? Or worse, a cruel trick meant to toy with his mind before delivering the final blow? He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His thoughts raced wildly, trying to make sense of what she just said. Vieira tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes never leaving his. "You heard me," she continued, her tone calm but firm. "Your life is slipping away, Captain Hale. Without my help, you won't survive the night. But saving you comes at a price, one I think you'll find reasonable given the circumstances." Ronan swallowed hard, his throat dry. His instincts screamed at him to refuse, to tell her exactly where she could shove her bizarre proposal, but logic quickly overrode his pride. She wasn't bluffing. He could feel it in the way she held herself, the confidence in her voice. Whatever she was offering wasn't just idle talk. She genuinely believed she could save him, and right now, survival outweighed everything else. Still, the absurdity of the situation gnawed at him. How could he possibly agree to marry someone he barely knew? Someone who wasn't even human? But then again, what choice did he really have? Death loomed over him like a shadow, cold and unrelenting. If saying yes meant living another day, even under strange and surreal terms, it was worth considering. "What happens if I say no?" he croaked, his voice barely audible over the din outside. Vieira's lips curved into a faint smile, though it lacked warmth. "Then you die," she replied matter-of-factly. "And trust me, Captain, dying here isn't nearly as pleasant as you might imagine." Her bluntness caught him off guard, but it also clarified things. There would be no bargaining, no room for negotiation. This was her offer, take it or leave it. Ronan clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling inside him. Part of him wanted to lash out, to call her bluff and prove her wrong. But another part, the rational part, knew better. Survival wasn't about pride. It was about doing whatever it took to stay alive. "Fine," he muttered after what felt like an eternity. "I'll do it. Just fix me." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Vieira's face, though it vanished almost instantly. "Good choice," she murmured, reaching into the folds of her robe. From somewhere within, she produced a small vial filled with a shimmering liquid that pulsed faintly with light. She uncorked it carefully and held it up to his lips. "Drink this. It will stabilize you until I can perform the necessary procedures." Ronan hesitated for a fraction of a second before obeying. The liquid tasted metallic and sweet at the same time, sending a tingling sensation coursing through his veins. Almost immediately, the sharp pain in his side dulled, replaced by a warm numbness that spread throughout his body. He slumped back against the cot, exhaling sharply. "You'll live," Vieira said softly, tucking the empty vial back into her robe. "For now. But remember our agreement, Captain. You belong to me now." Her words sent a shiver down his spine, though whether it was fear or anticipation, he couldn't quite tell. All he knew was that he'd just made a deal with a being far beyond his understanding, and there was no turning back. As the days passed, Ronan found himself growing increasingly uneasy. The wound in his side healed rapidly thanks to Vieira's mysterious treatments, but the emotional toll of their agreement weighed heavily on him. Every glance she gave him felt like a reminder of the pact they'd made, and every interaction left him questioning whether he'd made the right decision. Soldiers in the camp began whispering about the alien bride, their curiosity mingling with suspicion. Some admired her skill and grace, while others eyed her warily, unsure of her true intentions. Despite the swirling rumors, Ronan tried to focus on his duties. The battlefield remained unforgiving, with skirmishes breaking out daily. During one particularly brutal engagement, Ronan led his unit into a fierce firefight against enemy forces. Bullets whizzed past, explosions rocked the ground, and chaos reigned supreme. Midway through the battle, Ronan found himself pinned behind a crumbling wall, his rifle jammed and useless. Panic surged through him as enemy fire rained down mercilessly. Just when hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the smoke, a blur of lavender and silver moving with impossible speed. It was Vieira. Without hesitation, she dashed toward him, deflecting bullets with what appeared to be a shimmering energy shield emanating from her hands. When she reached him, she grabbed his arm and pulled him to safety, her strength surprising given her delicate appearance. "You're reckless," she scolded once they were out of immediate danger, her golden eyes flashing with irritation. "If you die now, our agreement means nothing." Ronan opened his mouth to retort but stopped short. Seeing her in action reminded him of how extraordinary she truly was, and how little he understood her. For all her aloofness, she'd risked her life to save his. Gratitude mixed awkwardly with guilt as he muttered a quiet thanks. Back at the tent, tensions simmered between them. Ronan struggled to reconcile his growing admiration for Vieira with the resentment he still harbored over their arrangement. One evening, after a long day of tending to the wounded, he confronted her. "Why me?" he demanded, his voice tinged with frustration. "Out of everyone here, why did you choose me?" Vieira paused, her hands hovering over a tray of instruments. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Because you intrigue me," she admitted after a moment. "Most humans are predictable, driven by fear or greed. But you're different. Even now, despite your anger, you haven't tried to break our deal. That tells me something." Her words caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't anticipated. Intrigue? Was that why she'd singled him out? Before he could respond, a sudden explosion rocked the camp, throwing them both off balance. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and soldiers scrambled to defend their position. In the ensuing confusion, Ronan and Vieira worked side by side, treating the injured and coordinating evacuations. Their teamwork was seamless, born of necessity and mutual respect. As they labored through the night, a tentative bond began to form, a fragile connection forged in the crucible of war. By dawn, the attack had subsided, leaving behind a trail of destruction and unanswered questions. Exhausted but alive, Ronan collapsed onto a cot, watching as Vieira tended to the last of the wounded. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, what did the future hold for them? And could their unlikely partnership survive the challenges ahead? As the days stretched into weeks, Ronan and Vieira's relationship grew increasingly complex. On the surface, they maintained a professional distance, working alongside each other in the medical tent and on the battlefield. Yet beneath the veneer of cooperation simmered a tension neither could ignore. Ronan found himself stealing glances at Vieira when she wasn't looking, marveling at the way her presence seemed to command both reverence and curiosity from those around her. Meanwhile, Vieira's interactions with him became subtly warmer, her sharp edges softening ever so slightly as she allowed glimpses of vulnerability to slip through. Their moments of levity often came unexpectedly, usually during the rare lulls between battles. One afternoon, as Ronan attempted to fix a stubborn piece of equipment, Vieira leaned over his shoulder, her silvery hair brushing his cheek. "You're holding it wrong," she teased lightly, her voice laced with amusement. "Here, let me show you." Before he could protest, she took the tool from his hand and demonstrated the correct technique, her movements fluid and precise. Ronan couldn't help but chuckle at his own clumsiness, earning a rare smile from her in return. These fleeting exchanges hinted at a camaraderie neither had anticipated, making the weight of their agreement feel less suffocating. Yet humor was often overshadowed by the stark realities of war. The constant threat of violence kept them grounded, reminding them that their lives were far from ordinary. During one harrowing mission, Ronan led a small team into enemy territory to retrieve vital supplies. Things went awry almost immediately. They were ambushed, and several men were critically injured. Vieira insisted on accompanying the rescue party, ignoring Ronan's protests. "I'm not letting you face this alone," she declared firmly, her golden eyes blazing with determination. The mission tested them both. Dodging enemy fire and navigating treacherous terrain, they managed to extract the survivors, but not without cost. One soldier died in Vieira's arms, his final breaths punctuated by whispered gratitude for her care. Ronan watched as she closed the young man's eyes, her usual composure cracking just enough to reveal the depth of her sorrow. Later, back at the tent, she sat quietly by herself, staring at her trembling hands. Ronan approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. Finally, he settled beside her, offering silent support. After a long pause, she spoke softly, her voice heavy with emotion. "This is why I fight, why I heal. Because life is precious, even in its fragility." Her words resonated deeply with Ronan, forcing him to confront his own motivations. He realized that, despite their differences, they shared a common purpose: to preserve life amidst chaos. This revelation brought them closer, though it also intensified the stakes of their agreement. The more Ronan saw of Vieira's dedication and compassion, the harder it became to view her solely as an alien with ulterior motives. She was becoming something else entirely, someone he respected, trusted, and perhaps even feared losing. Their bond faced its greatest trial during a massive assault that threatened to overrun the camp. Enemy forces launched a coordinated attack, overwhelming the defenders with sheer numbers. Explosions tore through the night, reducing tents to rubble and scattering soldiers in disarray. Amid the chaos, Ronan spotted Vieira tending to a fallen comrade near the front lines, completely exposed to enemy fire. Without thinking, he sprinted toward her, yelling for her to take cover. She looked up, startled, but instead of retreating, she grabbed his arm and pulled him down beside her. "We need to move these men," she shouted over the din, gesturing to the wounded scattered around them. Ronan hesitated, torn between protecting her and fulfilling her request. Sensing his indecision, Vieira fixed him with a piercing gaze. "Trust me," she urged. "Together we can save them." Something in her tone galvanized him. They worked in tandem, dragging injured soldiers to safety while dodging incoming fire. At one point, a grenade landed perilously close, forcing Vieira to throw herself over Ronan to shield him from the blast. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but when he looked up, he saw her gazing down at him, her expression unreadable. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze, the world reduced to the two of them amidst the carnage. Then she rolled off him, muttering, "Don't make me regret saving you twice." The comment drew a shaky laugh from Ronan, though he couldn't shake the intensity of the moment. It was clear now that their connection ran deeper than either had acknowledged. Whether it was love, duty, or something else entirely, it was undeniable and dangerous. As the battle raged on, Ronan found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. He admired Vieira's courage and selflessness, yet he couldn't suppress the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. What did she truly want from him? Was their agreement merely a transaction? Or was there more to her insistence on marriage than met the eye? These questions haunted him, even as he fought alongside her, determined to protect her at all costs. By the time the assault subsided, exhaustion had taken its toll. Both Ronan and Vieira collapsed onto the ground, surrounded by the aftermath of destruction. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt earth. As they caught their breath, Ronan turned to her, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Whatever happens next," he said, meeting her glowing eyes, "we face it together." Vieira studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Agreed," she replied, her voice steady despite the fatigue etched on her face. "But know this, Ronan Hale, you may have saved my life tonight as much as I've saved yours." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Whatever the future held, their fates were intertwined, bound by choices made in the heat of battle and promises whispered in the shadow of death. As dawn broke over the battered encampment, the remnants of the previous night's chaos lingered like a haunting specter. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, mingling with the dust kicked up by weary soldiers trudging through the debris. Ronan stood at the edge of the camp, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun painted the desert in hues of orange and gold. Despite the beauty of the morning, his thoughts remained clouded, weighed down by the enormity of what lay ahead. Vieira appeared beside him, her presence announced only by the faint rustle of her robes. She didn't speak immediately, content to share the silence as they both surveyed the desolate landscape. Eventually, she broke the quiet. "We can't stay here forever," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The enemy knows we're vulnerable. They'll regroup and strike again." Ronan nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know. We need to move, but where? Every direction feels like walking into a trap." He turned to look at her, his brow furrowed. "Do you have any ideas?" Vieira's golden eyes gleamed with a mixture of calculation and resolve. "There's a place, an outpost located in the mountains to the north. It's remote, defensible, and stocked with supplies. If we can reach it, we might stand a chance." The suggestion sparked a flicker of hope in Ronan, though skepticism quickly followed. "That's a risky journey. The terrain is brutal and we're already stretched thin. Not to mention, how do you even know about this place?" She hesitated, her expression guarded. "Let's just say I've been there before. Trust me, it's our best option." Ronan studied her for a moment, searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, he exhaled sharply. "All right, we'll prepare the troops and set out as soon as possible. But if this goes sideways, Vieira..." He trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken. Her lips curved into a faint smile, devoid of humor. "Understood. Now, let's get to work." The decision set off a flurry of activity. Orders were barked, gear was packed, and wounded soldiers were loaded onto makeshift stretchers. Morale was low, but the promise of safety spurred everyone into action. As preparations unfolded, Vieira moved among the ranks, offering encouragement and tending to last-minute injuries. Ronan watched her closely, marveling at her ability to inspire confidence even in the direst circumstances. By midday, the convoy was ready to depart. Soldiers formed a ragtag column, their faces etched with determination and fear. Ronan took point, leading the group with Vieira by his side. Her presence was a double-edged sword. While her expertise proved invaluable, her enigmatic nature continued to unsettle him. Still, he couldn't deny the comfort her proximity brought, however irrational it might seem. The journey north was grueling. The desert gave way to rocky hills and jagged cliffs, each step demanding more effort than the last. Supplies dwindled faster than anticipated, forcing ration cuts that left tempers frayed. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at the slightest provocation. Through it all, Ronan and Vieira remained steadfast, their leadership keeping the group from descending into chaos. One evening, as the convoy made camp in a narrow canyon, disaster struck. A scout returned with grim news. Enemy scouts had been spotted trailing them, likely preparing to ambush under cover of darkness. Panic rippled through the ranks, whispers of doom spreading like wildfire. Ronan called an emergency meeting with his officers, Vieira included, to devise a plan. "We can't outrun them," Ronan stated bluntly, pacing before the assembled group. "They're too close and we're too slow. Our only option is to fight." Murmurs of dissent greeted his words, but Vieira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "He's right. Fighting is risky, but staying put guarantees failure. We need to use the terrain to our advantage." Her suggestion sparked a heated debate, with arguments flying back and forth. Finally, Ronan raised a hand for silence. "Here's what we'll do," he announced, outlining a strategy that combined defensive fortifications with targeted counterattacks. "It's not perfect, but it gives us a fighting chance." The plan was put into motion with grim efficiency. Soldiers dug trenches and erected barricades using whatever materials they could scavenge. Weapons were distributed strategically, ensuring every man and woman had a role to play. As night fell, the camp transformed into a fortress of sorts, bristling with tension and anticipation. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. The stars above twinkled mockingly, oblivious to the mortal drama unfolding below. Ronan and Vieira patrolled the perimeter, checking defenses and bolstering morale. Each shared glance carried unspoken words, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes they faced. Then, without warning, the enemy struck. Shouts erupted as shadows detached from the darkness, charging toward the camp with terrifying speed. Chaos exploded, gunfire lighting up the night like fireworks. Ronan barked commands, directing his forces with precision honed by years of combat. Beside him, Vieira unleashed her unique abilities, her shimmering energy shields deflecting blows that would have otherwise been fatal. The battle raged fiercely, ebbing and flowing like a tide. Casualties mounted on both sides, the cost of survival written in blood and sacrifice. At one point, Ronan found himself cornered by a trio of enemy fighters, their weapons trained on him. Just as despair took hold, Vieira appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her hands crackling with energy. With a single gesture, she sent the attackers sprawling, their weapons reduced to useless scrap. "Stay focused," she snapped, pulling him to his feet. "We're not done yet." Grateful but shaken, Ronan nodded and rejoined the fray. Together, they fought side by side, their synergy unmatched. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The enemy's numbers dwindled, their resolve crumbling under the relentless assault. By dawn, the battlefield was eerily quiet, littered with bodies and wreckage. Breathing heavily, Ronan surveyed the aftermath, his heart heavy with loss yet buoyed by triumph. Vieira joined him, her usual composure marred by streaks of dirt and dried blood. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate in the face of such devastation. Finally, Ronan broke the silence. "We did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Against all odds, we survived." Vieira nodded, her golden eyes reflecting the rising sun. "Yes, we did. But this victory comes at a price. The road ahead will be harder now." He sighed, knowing she was right. Yet despite the uncertainty looming over them, a spark of defiance ignited within him. "Then we'll face it head-on," he declared, his tone resolute. "Together." Vieira smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting ever so slightly. "As agreed." And so, amidst the ruins of war, their bond solidified further, a testament to resilience and unity forged in fire. What awaited them beyond the mountains remained unknown, but one thing was certain. They would meet it as one, bound not just by necessity, but by something deeper and more enduring. As the survivors regrouped and tended to their wounded, the weight of their victory settled over them like a bittersweet mist. The enemy had been repelled, but the cost was etched into every face, both human and alien alike. Ronan stood at the center of it all, his body weary yet his spirit unbroken. Beside him, Vieira moved with quiet purpose, her luminous presence offering solace to those who needed it most. Despite the exhaustion that clung to them, there was an undeniable sense of hope in the air. They had survived against overwhelming odds, and now they were closer than ever to reaching the mountain outpost, a sanctuary that promised safety and respite from the relentless battles. For Ronan and Vieira, however, The journey ahead carried layers of meaning far beyond mere survival. Their bond had deepened through shared trials, transforming what began as a reluctant agreement into something neither could deny any longer. The next morning, as the convoy resumed its trek northward, Ronan found himself walking beside Vieira more often than not. Her silver-lavender skin shimmered faintly in the sunlight, and her golden eyes sparkled with a mixture of determination and something softer, something he couldn't quite name. At one point, she glanced at him, catching him staring. Instead of teasing him or looking away, she smiled gently. "What?" she asked, her voice carrying a playful lilt. Ronan hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing. Just thinking. About." He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. This whole thing. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you made me agree to your terms." Vieira raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering across her features. "Oh, and why is that?" "Because," he admitted, his tone growing serious, "if you hadn't, I wouldn't have realized how much you mean to me, how much we've become, well, partners." Her expression softened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "Partners," she echoed quietly. "Yes, I suppose we are." The rest of the journey passed in a blur of rugged terrain and cautious optimism. When they finally reached the mountain outpost, they were greeted by breathtaking views and sturdy stone walls that promised refuge. The structure itself was ancient, built centuries ago by a civilization long forgotten. Inside, they discovered ample supplies, clean water, and even remnants of technology that hinted at advanced capabilities. For the first time in weeks, the group allowed themselves to relax. Fires were lit, food was cooked, and laughter filled the chilly mountain air. Ronan and Vieira wandered together along the ramparts, taking in the panoramic vista of jagged peaks and endless skies. "It's beautiful," Ronan murmured, leaning against the railing. "Peaceful." "Yes," Vieira agreed, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "But peace is fleeting. We must remain vigilant." He nodded, knowing she was right. Yet, for now, they could afford to let their guard down just a little. Turning to face her, he took a deep breath. "Vieira, there's something I need to say." She tilted her head, curiosity lighting up her golden eyes. "Go on." "All this time, I've been focused on surviving, to the point where I didn't stop to think about what comes after. But now," he paused, searching for the right words, "now I realize that I don't want to face whatever comes next without you. Not because of some deal we made, but because I care about you more than I ever expected." Vieira stared at him, her lips parted slightly in surprise. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. A genuine, radiant smile that transformed her entire being. "Ronan Hale," she said softly, "you have no idea how long I've waited to hear you say that." Before he could respond, she closed the distance between them, placing her hands on his chest. Her touch sent a jolt of warmth through him, grounding him in ways he hadn't known he needed. "I chose you for a reason," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I wanted someone to save, but because I saw something in you. A strength, a kindness, that reminded me of why life is worth fighting for." Tears pricked at the corners of Ronan's eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. "So, does this mean we're actually going to do this? Get married, I mean?" Vieira laughed softly, the sound musical and light. "If you're willing to take the leap, then yes. Let's make it official." Their wedding took place under the open sky, surrounded by the people who had come to rely on them both. Soldiers and medics gathered in a makeshift circle, cheering and clapping as Ronan and Vieira exchanged vows. Though the ceremony was simple, it was imbued with profound emotion. As they sealed their union with a kiss, the crowd erupted into cheers, lifting their weapons high in celebration. In the months that followed, the outpost became more than just a refuge. It became a home. Under Ronan and Vieira's leadership, the community thrived. Fields were cultivated, trade routes established, and alliances forged with neighboring settlements. Life wasn't without challenges, but together, they faced each obstacle with unwavering resolve. And then came the children. Their firstborn arrived during a particularly harsh winter, a tiny miracle wrapped in blankets and glowing faintly with traces of Vieira's otherworldly essence. Over the years, more followed, each unique, blending human and alien traits in ways that fascinated and delighted everyone around them. The children grew up hearing stories of their parents' adventures, learning the values of courage, compassion, and unity. Years turned into decades, and Ronan and Vieira watched with pride as their family expanded and flourished. Together, they created a legacy, not just of survival, but of love, hope, and resilience. Their marriage remained a testament to the power of trust and partnership, proving that even in the darkest times, light could be found. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mountains in hues of gold and crimson, Ronan sat beside Vieira on the same ramparts where they had once confessed their feelings. Their grandchildren played nearby, laughing and chasing each other in the fading light. "You know," Ronan said, his voice warm with contentment, "I never imagined my life turning out like this, but I wouldn't change a single moment." Vieira leaned her head against his shoulder, her golden eyes reflecting the stars beginning to twinkle above. "Neither would I," she replied softly. "This is everything I hoped for, and so much more." Hand in hand, they gazed out at the world they had helped build. A world shaped by love, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that even in the harshest deserts, life could bloom. And as the night enveloped them, they knew their story was far from over. It was merely the beginning of something extraordinary, a tale that would echo through generations to come.